Hello, everyone. This is Dave Watkins. Webmaster, are you going to do the introduction or shall I just proceed?
Yep,
I've
I'll
not
take over.
heard. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Omnex webinar, Key Changes in the New APQP 3rd Edition and Control Plan 1st Edition Manuals. Today's webinar is being moderated by Dave Watkins. Having been with Omnex for nearly 29 years, Dave helped establish most of Omnex international offices, um, as well as working with primary leadership teams as global consultant and trainer, focusing primarily on organizational effectiveness and optimizing new product development and launch. Dave joined Omnex following a career as a production manager, HR director, plant manager, and CEO of several mid-sized manufacturing companies. During this webinar, if you have any questions for the moderator, please enter them in the QA box, and Dave and the panel will try to get to them at the best of their ability at the end of the webinar or throughout as we go. And just for everybody, so everybody knows, the webinar is being recorded, and somebody from Omnex will reach out to you after the webinar with how to access the recording and all of the slides. All right, Dave, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And hello again, everyone. A little bit of a rocky start, but we will catch up. So thank you for the introduction. I'll be saying a little bit about the panel. However, if you've been watching the crawl, the bios would take me the entire webinar to describe the serious experience we're going to be possessed by our panelists. So today we're going to be very briefly touching on some of the highlights of changes in the APQP manual, the 3rd edition, and the new control plan manual, which is now, as you may know, published as a separate manual. The 3 panelists who are going to be speaking to you are recognized subject matter experts globally, combined over 120 years experience with Ford, GM, Chrysler, Stellantis, several major tier 1 suppliers, and all of them participated in and contributed to the authoring of the APQP manuals and the core tools manuals. Unlike most webinars, this is going to be more of a podcast approach with each of our panelists commenting on what they feel are key changes to the APQP manual, and Greg giving us a brief discussion of the control plan manual before Anthony John gives us a brief presentation on software solutions for supporting these changes. And as our webmaster pointed out, you will be offered the opportunity to get copies of the materials. Uh,
Dave, this is Anthony.
yes.
Dave, I think you have to switch your display. We're seeing just the um, portion. Yeah, a different monitor, I think.
Sorry about that.
No worries.
Um, you're seeing the screen that says webinar agenda now?
Yep, that's
Good.
right. Yep,
That's good.
good. Yeah.
That's remarkable. Okay. Zoom got me again. It's, it's good at that. Okay, very briefly, our agenda is first of all to discuss some of the significant changes in APQP 3rd edition, focusing primarily on leadership engagement, what we're calling Phase O, which is the book calls Getting Started, which has a significant change in it or addition. Phase gates and gate reviews, which are in addition, new gate review deliverables checklists, which are also new and extensive, project risk mitigation, which while APQP has always focused on project risk, it's been primarily uh, on product and process. And now, in alignment with IATF 16949, it's addressing overall project risk and then program metrics. Again, a comment is that a lot of these are aligning the new manual with IATF 16949. When we go to part 2, Greg's going to provide a discussion of control plans, looking at requirements, and then development, phases, and effective use, because there are not, frankly, significant changes to the control plan itself, but there is a lot of guidance provided and the addition of one new to the manual control plan. And then, as I said, Anthony John will be giving you a brief presentation on software solutions. So I'm going to turn the floor over to Mike Down and let him begin the process talking about leadership, engagement, and focus. Mike, over to you.
Yeah, one of the big changes, and this seems to be similar to what happened in the AIAG VDA FMEA, is this reinforcement of leadership's involvement and participation, and also them assuming the risk that in a lot of cases you would have different groups and silos that would be talking about the risk. But here we're seeing this change in how we track APQP and the gate reviews, and that leadership is going to participate and be signing off on these on any risk that they move forward with. Also, they took the word management out of the manual and converted it to leadership, which is a better definition of what needs to happen. So all through the podcast today, and as we look at the changes, you'll see that there's this movement to have leadership lead and support and assume the risk as they go through the APQP process, and also some additions of metrics and monitoring the system as we go along. So, and I put the quote of Deming on this slide, that the transformation will come from leadership, and that's what needs to happen if your culture is going to change and start applying these APQP principles. So that's my shot. So
thank you. It's intriguing in the sense that it is a more significant change than the limited language seems to imply. And Mary, would you like to comment?
Yes, not.
Mary?
Oh, unmute. Okay. Yeah, I have a few comments. The new APQP reference manual emphasizes a very active role of leadership in the involvement of participation in the APQP gate reviews. Even though the OEM customers are not required to formally approve or sign off on the completion of the itemized activities and deliverables, there are still some references to customer-specific requirements, and we'll talk about that a little bit more as we get into the gate reviews. This thinking in the new APQP is in line with the IATF requirements for management reviews. In the Ford customer-specific requirements, for example, monthly quality operating systems reviews that include metrics reviews, including those from items in the APQP gates, are a new aspect of this as well. To also reference the AIAG VDA FMEA methodology, let's talk about that. This level of leadership that we've just described in the APQP is very supportive of this new AIAG VDA methodology for FMEA development. The results documentation section, step 7 of this process, underlines the importance of management involvement in understanding product and process risks. This is an important point because in step 7, results of the design and process FMEAs are reviewed with company leadership. That was never a formalized requirement in the past. And in these,
Mary,
yes?
yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I think you put your finger on what is really, in a broad sense, between both of you, the most significant aspect of this is the recognition that, and this is our experience with a lot of clients, companies where leadership is not adequately engaged in either of these activities, either overall APQP as part of the new product development process, where it's often treated independently of the new product development process, or as you say, in accepting ownership of risk in the FMEA process.
Yeah, let me
So
say one
thank
more.
you very much.
Let me say one more thing about that. In step 7, mitigated risks are identified and described with optimization actions that have been taken, but identified risks that haven't been addressed with recommended actions due to resource or technology constraints are going to be recognized by leadership as residual risks. And this is something very new and very, very important, really. So go ahead, Dave, with what you were saying.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I would agree with you. I think that the last phrase you said is the leadership assuming responsibility for risk rather than saying it's the responsibility of the APQP team or the project leader or anyone else for that matter, that it is the key process in the organization, new product development, launch, and then continuing value and continual improvement. And both of these approaches are stressing that responsibility.
Good.
Now, to introduce the next topic, I'm going to speak briefly on what I, from my personal experience working with many companies around the globe, consider to be, while it's treated lightly in the handbook, a very significant change. It is recognizing in the startup phase, what we're referring to as phase 0, the need to address at the concept level sourcing decisions, and in particular to identify, characterize high risk suppliers. We may be forced to use a high risk supplier, a supplier that is evaluated as high risk but necessary to the program, and what things we build into all of the phases to ensure that those risks don't impair or lead to failures at various points in deliverables along the way. In my mind, that plus capturing and adequately analyzing requirements, both customer and legal and regulatory requirements during this concept phase, are critical. So it's an interesting addition to startup to incorporate. And as I say, the handbook, the manual provides a list of specific criteria to help define what is a high risk supplier, and then it actually mandates, to the degree that a reference document can mandate, required activities for mitigating the risk of those high risk suppliers. Bearing in mind, we're saying, and it's true, that this is a guidance document, but in most automotive customer supplier relationships, it's a customer specific requirement and therefore a contractual requirement. And so things that we refer to as guidance become mandatory. That is likely to be the case with a number of the new requirements as our panel talks about. Checklists and gate reviews, things like that are very much likely to become customer specific requirements based on these reference manuals.
Just a comment. The addition of this phase 0 adds evaluations at an even earlier phase of the product and process development process. This whole idea, phase 0, gate 0, introduces the idea for risk assessment associated with incomplete or failure to achieve certain APQP deliverables in a timely way. We're using hard metrics. These hard metrics are introduced in this phase 0. And again, we're now obligated to formally evaluate progress in the development of these deliverables. And so, again, in phase 0, we're charging the APQP team to generate gate-by-gate measurables. And we'll talk about that relative to gate reviews as well. Dave, did you want to say more about? Keep going.
Well, I was just going to add that some of the most, I'll be blunt and say, catastrophic launches that I've seen, and a couple involved aircraft, airframes, and railroad systems, complete railroad systems, hinged on sourcing decisions and suppliers who turned out to be significant risks and that this had not been anticipated in program planning. So this is not a minor addition. Moving on then, Mary just introduced the subject, so I'll turn it back over to her to talk about the addition of gates, phase gates, and gate reviews, another significant modification.
Yeah, this is one that I think most people are going to like very much. The new APQP reference offers a really positive addition to the development process. The gate reviews that we'll be discussing are included in Appendix B. They're intended to be self-assessment of the progression of the development of deliverables over the course of the product and process development of a program. Right now, we're looking at 6 defined gate reviews. These gates are in close alignment to the 5 phases that were previously described in the APQP reference, but notably now there's a new, and as we have already discussed, a very early assessment which evaluates the program at the concept phase, this gate 0. The gates, well, the concept phase gate and the program approval phase gate, phase 1, are somewhat parallel to the former program approval phase. And so to some degree, we're combining the required deliverables from gate 0 with gate 1. And again, this is just a much earlier and much more rigorous set of requirements than we've seen in the past. And again, as all of our presenters have said, these gates are identifying a progression of deliverables required of the first and sub-tier suppliers. We're getting into requirements of the sub-tier suppliers a lot more formally than maybe we've ever done in the past. Again, they're intended to be formal assessments by the first tier. And so as we look at gate reviews, and I won't go into all of the detail, just let's summarize to say, again, there's much more involvement in support of leadership, more assessment of capability risk. Again, these include capacity risk and delivery and timing as well. We're now looking at formal APQP program metrics, gate by gate by gate. And again, we're very specifically looking at tiered supplier capabilities and readiness. The same kinds of things that we would normally have cited for the first tier supplier, the FMEAs, the control plans, the work instructions, and all of that, the MSA evaluations and so forth, all of those things are now likewise applied to the sub-tier suppliers. And so, again, gate by gate, we're assessing deliverables as we progress through prototype, pre-launch, a new step, safe launch, and a production. So again,
Mary,
yes?
Thanks very much. I don't mean to cut you off, but we're very time constrained today. I think that you're getting to the heart of it, which is that most organizations have had some sort of phase gate approach. And what the manual is now doing is constructively adding structure and monitoring and deliverables to those phase gates to incorporate all of the APQP deliverables. And that's a big plus.
Okay.
Mike, thank you. Mike, did you have a comment?
have to unmute if you're going to say something.
No, I don't have any more. It's just I support what you've said, is that they're really trying to define how these phases are evaluated and signed off in relation to the risks. So.
Okay, fair enough. All right, thank you. Greg, let's bring you up to bat to talk about the addition of checklists, which are related to what we were just discussing, because for all of the deliverables in these phase gates, there are new structured and quite comprehensive checklists. So over to you.
Thank you, Dave. Yes, in the version 2, there were a series of checklists. And this slide identifies that there are 7 of the checklists that are carried over. Now, they've been upgraded. Some of the questions have been moved around, have been reworded, but essentially they have the same focus. However, there are some new checklists. There's the risk factor checklist, which gets into the risk analysis, change management, and sourcing checklist. The sourcing checklist is by far the most extensive. They got a lot of questions in there. Next slide, Dave. Now, these are not intended to be a job description, or not intended to be a compendium of how you're supposed to do the different activities. They are really a form of self-audit. So you can look at these and say, all right, have we considered all these? Now, it is also viewed as a review sheet by the OEMs or the customer if you're a lower tiered on that. So it is only focusing on the key area. And you can make modifications. If you are going to eliminate some of the questions, you have to get the approval by your customer. Next slide. So they are designed as a check in the box. Now, with that said, as it turns out, this is in Appendix A. As part of Appendix B, which deals with the gate reviews, every gate review description has a form, and the form can be thought of as a check sheet. It does not use the same format as the checklists, but so we do have the 5 additional forms for the gate reviews. So the checklist should be reviewed by the people who are implementing it, and you can expand upon it. It is, again, not a formal requirement depending upon your particular customers. However, any changed checklists need to be reviewed and signed off by the customer. And I believe that's the last one for checklists.
Right. Sorry, I was answering a question. It's a good question, by the way. I may answer it publicly as well, which is the classic issue of how do small companies cope with this, with the rigor of this process? And the answer is it's a gating issue for getting into automotive production, and a company that's bidding on automotive business needs to know what the requirements are, what the scope is, and what resources are going to be needed, because they're not going to be forgiven for it. It's a part of doing business. Organizations are going to supply, and I may say now also aerospace, high-tech electronics, and medical devices, all industries that are adopting APQP and PPAP and basing their models on the automotive model, that this becomes a gating issue for for being a supplier in these industries. And sorry, but that's the way it is. I don't mean sorry. I mean that the organizations need to have the requisite bandwidth. So would anybody else like to comment on this? Perhaps, Mary, you talked about the gating reviews and you mentioned this. Do you have anything to add, or should we just go on?
No, not very much. There are almost 30 pages of checklists that are developed in a topic by topic fashion. So topic by topic, these checklists support more than one of the gate reviews. And as we've all said, there's much more extensive emphasis on supplier sourcing. That's all.
And yes, and to take that back to that question I was just answering, one of the things that these checklists do and the gate reviews do is, for a smaller company that is maybe new to the automotive industry, it provides a lot of structure and guidance to help them work their way through a process, a lot of which may be significantly new and challenging.
Absolutely.
And that's a nice introduction to the next topic, and on risk mitigation. And by the way, let me just say, you're getting a discussion of risk mitigation from one of the worldwide recognized gurus on risk. That's Greg Gruska. So, Greg, over to you.
Thank you. We have had comments about risk dealing with the gate reviews and the overall structure of APQP. The gate review, or the risk mitigation within APQP 3rd edition, really is in alignment with IATF clauses 6.1 and 6.2. Specifically, it does not have a complete section saying this is what you do in risk. That's not the intent of APQP. Is more of providing an overall approach, but there is an added section. In fact, Dave was talking about high-risk suppliers. So there is a section that does talk about the high-risk supplier evaluation, the fact that it is expected. In Chapter 1, in the plan and define the program, it does include the APQP program metrics, and this will be further discussed next in the schedule, but it does include the risk, specifically the risk mitigation plan. Again, this is in support of the IATF requirements. And the gate review relates to the overall APQP review, guidance, and risk mitigation for all the phases. So it is not brought out as a specific activity, but it is a central theme in the new product development process. The next slide, please. All right. It also includes support activities. In the checklist, there is the risk factor checklist. Again, it is not a compendium, but it is thought starters that you could say, have we considered all these particular things? And there is an Appendix C, which is the analytical techniques, which now does include the FMEA. Not a whole lot on it because we have an entire reference manual and handbook dealing with FMEAs, but it does reinforce the fact that the FMEA is one of the primary tools in risk evaluation and mitigation. And there is in analytical tools, it also talks about the risk assessment mitigation plan. So it does provide an example of what is needed in a risk mitigation plan. And the approach is really that consistent with the different standards on risk assessment within ISO. So it is not anything brand new. If you have been doing following IATF and or ISO 9001, where they talk about risk-based thinking, and you are looking at how do I do risk management, it goes through the identifying the risks, doing the rating, the control, the treatment, and then finally the monitoring. So it is consistent with that activity. And I believe that's it. The next slide is the comments.
Yeah, and I'll only make one brief one, which is, it's been our practice and our teaching since before APQP was defined and documented by some of the panelists, that what was missing from most organizations' new product development processes was a number of approaches to risk management and risk mitigation. And so you can look at APQP in toto and say what it's doing is braiding risk management into the entire process. And now it's simply giving more rigor to it, it's giving more support, and it's making it more an integral part of the new product development process as it's called for in IATF, and for that matter, other industry standards like AS 9100, ISO 13485, ISO 27001. So they're all risk related. They all take risk-based thinking. But what this is doing with APQP is really weaving it into or braiding it into the overall new product development process. So at this point, then I'm going to bring it back to Mike. Mike, while you're at it, there have been several questions, and I frankly don't know the answer. Questions regarding when the changes to the APQP manual become effective and whether or not they've already been buttonholed as customer-specific requirements by any of the major OEMs. Don't mean to put you on the spot, but I'm putting you on the spot.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything that formally has come out, but I would just keep track of the customer specifics, and that there should be a message coming out soon from OEMs on when they would expect you to start applying this. If we follow the normal rule, it's going to be at least 4 to 6 months before they start looking at you to start transitioning. So, and maybe even a year, but it's going to come out of the OEMs, and that should have been part of the rollout of the material, and I haven't seen it where it said any specifics. So,
but as I said before, this is Mary. Under the Ford's specific requirements, the CSRs for Ford, they ask for a minimum of a monthly quality operating systems review that includes a review of performance in the APQP process. So that it's an oblique reference, but it's still there. And again, that standard just came out in March.
I mean,
Thank you, Mary. Okay.
Yeah, I think we could follow the same rollout of the AIAG VDA FMEA manual that they gave you kind of 3 options. If you're working on a program right now, you're not going to be required to switch over to the new system, but as new programs come up, they're going to probably be requiring that. So.
We have one respondent, by the way, who has said, and thank you, Teresa, that GM is requiring us by November of this year.
Yeah, see, that's pretty common, almost a year, 6 or 8 months. So.
Okay, want to take a minute on metrics because time is pressing.
Yeah. and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. It's just the fact that they've given a little bit of definition around the metrics that should be used as you're going through the different gates and reviews of APQP, and they're tracking metrics, and they're basically using the green, yellow, red evaluation and show what leadership positions should be involved in what parts of the program. So, and they give you an example that of what a metric tracking method could be used. But again, that's going to be just a general example, and I expect more specifics coming from the OEMs and their customer specific areas. So, but the metrics are used to again engage management so that they understand where the programs are, and if there's a yellow and red, what type of actions are going to take to mitigate those and get them all green. And so that's it.
Well, thanks. Greg, you're our guru for quantitative analysis as well. Any comments from you?
No, not really. The metrics, it is, the APQP manual is not prescriptive in the sense of saying these are the metrics you must use. It depends upon the organization and what is needed. You need to go through the business operating system approach, look at the top level, look at the context that you're going to be doing it, determine what is needed at each level of your organization. But, and all those fit into the APQP. Again, as you said previously, this stuff has been around and it's only now being formalized, if you will, in the APQP manual.
Yeah, I agree, and I have one comment, which is it has I've dealt with many executive leadership teams of companies in automotive, in aerospace, and in other industries, and I'm frequently shocked, frankly, to find out that these leadership teams are not getting or using metrics on their new product development and launch processes. They tend to look at individual projects, but not how effective are the processes. And I think that, IATF found it necessary to call that out as a required set of inputs to management review. APQP now is calling it, I'm saying, look, you need to be monitoring not just individual programs, you need to be monitoring the effectiveness of your process. This is the money-making process. So I could go on a long rant about that. There isn't time. This is a key to leadership saying, look, folks, you ultimately are accountable for these programs. You need to be heavily engaged in monitoring and understanding and leading.
Yeah, to reinforce that, the same thing is true just in general on continual improvement. People think about that typically in product only, but continual improvement is for every aspect of the organization, which includes, as you said, the overall process, reviewing the process itself.
Indeed.
Yeah, Dave, one last comment. It's really important that there's some type of synchronization between the APQP process and the regular program itself, because there are key areas, like, for example, I need to have samples to verify gauges. I need to have the process evaluated prior to launch. You can't do those things if they're not integrated into the program, and that's why a lot of companies have terrible launches.
Yeah, I would say I've been proselytizing about this for 20 years, that APQP is not separate from your new product development process. They should be seamless And I get distressed. I think one of you mentioned recently being at a client who had a vice president for APQP,
Right.
and I
was
nearly
me.
keeled over. I said,
That was
"Yeah,
me.
it was you, Mike." I
Yeah.
nearly keeled over. I was like, "Wait a minute. APQP is not a separate silo or department or function. It's an integral part of new product development launch." Having said that, we need to move
Yep.
on. I'm going to throw it back to Greg to talk about briefly about control plans for part 2 of this presentation.
All right, go to the next slide. All right, control plans is nothing new. They've been around. The previous discussion on control plans was part of APQP version 2. It was a chapter in there. The chapter was 22 pages long. It described what the form was and what the purpose and what are the information that goes into each of the individual columns in the form itself. That is still the same. However, it is now in a separate reference manual. And consequently, it went from 22 pages to 76 pages. The difference is not in the actual form itself or how you develop the form. It reinforces all the ways we have spoken about control plans in the past. The checklists are still, control plan checklist is still part of APQP manual, as well as being in the control plan manual. So it has 4 chapters. The primary aspects of it is the same as version 2. Go to the next slide. So the question is, well, what do they do? How did they go from 22 to 76 pages? Well, those are other support activities or implementation activities or use of the control plan. So the control plan format, the use of special characteristics is the same as in APQP version 2. However, they have reinforced all those areas that are in the bold.
Sorry about that.
Okay. All those areas that are in the bold are either expanded or new in the new guidelines. And they are useful because they answer a lot of questions people have had in control plans. Like, how do you handle directed supply? Your OEM says you're going to buy the component from this particular supplier. Well, how do you handle that? How do you handle pass-through characteristics? Those are characteristics which are created by a sub-supplier that you do not do anything with. Whatever the sub-supplier produced, the quality of that particular characteristic is passed through to the customer on it. Rework and repair control plans. Again, this is consistent with version 2, what was in there, but it's explicit that you if you're doing repairs, if the product is pulled out of the normal stream of things, it has to have its own control plan. How do you handle visual inspection, black box processes? Again, that goes kind of with the purchase of the product as it goes through. Non-design responsible organizations, what are the obligations they have? They do talk about process owners for the APQP and the control plan in a general sense. And they do talk about using software to develop and manage. Software is not required by the reference manual. However, they do say that if some customers may require the use of software, or for that matter, a specific software. Currently,
So
there is,
Greg,
yes.
Greg, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Again, the clock is beating on us.
All right.
Is it a fair statement? I think it is, that most of these things are added because they align with requirements in IATF, like the rework and repair control plans, like how you use 100% visual inspection and process ownership and things like that. And the software issue is now a CSR for several companies. So with that, I apologize for cutting you off, but I have to give some time to Anthony John to provide a little insight into that last point. And if there are a couple of moments, there are a lot of questions. We'll try to loop back to them, but we're not going to have time for them unless we move on.
Okay, let me make one comment on the next
Sure.
slide. The chapter 4 is includes a lot of implementation. They are not directly related to developing the control plan, but they are in the implementation of the control plan. There's also a safe launch control plan, which is not a separate phase. It is a subset of the pre-launch or production control plan. And your customers may ask for a safe launch control plan until you have verified that everything is running smoothly. All right, that's it.
Thanks, Greg. And again, I apologize for pressing you time-wise, but I am going to turn the floor over now to Anthony John, because a basic comment I'm going to make is, folks, you can't do this without software, whether it's Omnex or someone else's. You really can't do APQP. You can't develop all of the documentation and maintain it with all of the hardwired linkages and maintain currency and manage projects effectively without a solution. So on that note, let me turn things over to Anthony John.
Thank you, Dave. Hope you can see my screen coming up.
We do.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Dave and Greg. All right, very interesting, webinar so far. A lot of insight. Thank you, and again, welcome once again to all our customers from different parts of the globe. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. So I think I've already logged in as a user, and Dave, to your point, it's not just software. I think the big trend today is the digitalization. Digitalization of your enterprise quality, APQP, and a new product development is no exception to it. So I've logged in as, let's say, a program manager view, and I'm going to just talk about the key points that the APQP control plan standard has asked, and how some of the software solutions should or will support. In our software, we are able to define all the project templates. Okay, so when you go into a project template, you should be able to see all the different project templates that I have. So you can continue to have the older edition until, like, for example, if your customers are not asking for it, you can keep the old ones, then happy performance, and also could have the new APQP version. Okay? So phase 0 project plan activities could be included, and also all these forms, the digital forms that that's being discussed, especially the ones that Greg highlighted, they can all be digitalized into it. Now, you don't have to necessarily just digitalize only those specific forms. The system will allow you to create and manage all the forms in a digital form. So why digitalization? Now, once you have all the forms available as data, then you can report out on it, you can come up with analysis, and so on. You can also look at, let's look at a project here, and let's take a project that was created out of that project template. So you set up the template once with all your APQP deliverable steps documents, approvals, risk, which is again very unique to our tool. And then once you have those deliverables, documents, approvals, and outputs needed, you can navigate to any one of these documents and access those deliverables. Okay, so let's look at for example, a checklist for phase one. So I'm showing a phase one risk assessment mitigation checklist. Just have to click on that click icon to open it, and you should be able to see a checklist. So here, this is the live form that I talked about. Now, depending on the tool that you're using, if you are using a project management tool, you can use maybe spreadsheet, but I think the idea is to have these forms digitalized so you can build logics and you can actually fill this form like a live form inside the system, okay? And capture data and use that data to analyze. So here's one of those risk factor checklists. You can send it and route it for approval, have multiple rounds of approval that you need, all these definitions that you can do as part of your project management or program management. Another example of a checklist here is to say, for example, here's a FEMA. When you go into a process PFMEA, you're able to include all your documents that you need, like a process flow, a FMEA checklist. It could be an FMEA reference manual. It could be any supporting documents. So let's look at one of those checklists as an output. So you see, once these are also published, go ahead. So you can publish these documents. You can have a live form once it's published, and it can also be sent for approval. Now, the manual also talks about a recommendation of, or at least a software. So you can also have FMEA software, which links to a control plan also. So for example, this is the particular product. You can see a PFMEA that we have attached to as part of those deliverables. Okay, so the idea being that you could have just a project or a program, and all the activities related to that is all linked together in one place. Gate reviews is another change as part of the new APQP and control plan changes. So in our software, we already had these gate reviews, so you will continue to use those gate reviews. And you open, say, for example, phase one, look at a gate review here, and you can see all the gate review documents that has been already submitted is available with the status of who's approved it. You can have a gate review checklist. Here's the form. As I said, you can use like a live form or PDF, whatever suits. You can also include reviewer comments in this gate review. Each of you can comment and give feedback on this review. There's also a document reviewer access available that allows you to see a little bit more details on the document in terms of what were the documents that was approved, reviewed, GYR status against each of those deliverables and documents. Okay. The last part of it is actually control plan. I wanted to show that you can build the 4 different types of control plans. For example, in phase 2, I could actually have a prototype control plan. Let me open the phase 2. See a prototype build control plan, open it. Now these documents are again live and have been published. So you can, now I'm seeing like a revision controlled prototype build control plan. Oops. I will have in a phase 3, we'll have a pre-launch control plan, and And in phase 4, you would actually have safe launch control plan and production control plan. So these documents are built in. Let me show you a live version of the safe launch control plan also. All right. So what we're trying to present, or the concept here, is that of digitalization. Digitalize all your forms, manage your data. Once you have data, then you can report on it. You can build your business intelligence on it. Artificial intelligence will play a big role in managing and predicting using your existing data. Dave, I forgot to mention this to you, that we are going to have an exclusive webinar on APQP control plan changes with a more detailed, in-depth review on how a software handles not just the overall program launch, but also the GUIR status, um, all the digitalized forms, and the value that business intelligence and AI can bring to it.
Great,
With that,
thanks.
so I left 2 more minutes. Dave, go ahead. Take it from here.
Yeah, that was very efficient of you, Anthony, and believe me, from my exposure to and use of the software, it is the part related particularly to APQP and to project management is pretty remarkable at this point. A very mature and very capable package. That landing page is an absolute jewel for any project manager or somebody who has the role of managing a number of projects. There have
Absolutely.
been thanks. There have been a lot of questions. I've tried to answer some of them in real time. I'm now going to scroll through them quickly because there are a couple to which I don't know the answer. We've had the discussions of the effective dates, and I think we're simply going to have to rely on the OEMs and the first tiers to roll out their requirements, and I'm sure they're going to be doing that. Having said that, I think the changes can be blended into your process as you go. The checklist, the gate reviews, I think you're going to have to, if you don't currently use phase gates, and I would say probably 90% of the automotive companies that I deal with anyway use some approach to phase gate project management. So it's not going to be a radical change for them, but incorporating the checklist might actually prove to be helpful, but it's going to take some effort, and applying the metrics is absolutely going to be helpful. It's a little bit, from my perspective, challenging to understand a leadership team or a management team that doesn't already have good metrics for monitoring both individual projects and the overall effectiveness of their new product development process and continual improvement. That's what a BOS model is designed for. It's what the IATF approach to management review is, particularly if you use it as a monthly operating management review rather than the just once a year, we're going to check off the box type approach, which if your auditor is letting you get away with, you need to replace your auditor. That's an editorial comment. There have been several people who've asked whether or not we issue certificates for participating in a webinar like this, so you have some evidence that may be necessary to account for your time. That is not a standard practice, and it's in part because the number of participants, in this case, we've got upwards of 400, I think, to start with, we had upwards of 400 people participating. So I'm not sure what we can do along those lines. If you send an email to Omnex, then maybe on an individual basis we can give you a response verifying that you participated. But I can't imagine a practical solution to doing that for all for everyone, particularly since a lot of people probably don't need it. But if you do need it, you can send an inquiry to Omnex and we will help. There's a question Miguel Sosa asked, which was to be part of this presentation, but we ran out of time, which is how well the new edition takes into account the evolution in technology, electronics, functional safety, ASPICE, cybersecurity. And the answer is it's a missed opportunity. They really didn't incorporate systems engineering in the V model at this point. There's no reason why your organization can't address all these things in their approach to APQP. But to be kind of blunt, it was a missed opportunity. The new third edition really doesn't speak to autonomous vehicles, electric vehicles. I mean, they're mentioned, but it's not addressing things like mechatronics and software verification and validation specifically. It's there in the background. So and Mike, you could take a second for those who are still with us, if you want to comment on that further.
Yeah, in our training, we're going to probably add some of the misinformation as suggestions on how to handle the ISO 26262 and ASPICE and functional safety and mechatronics, because there's going to be a lot of questions around that. And to properly manage those functional safety issues, they need to be integrated into the APQP process. So it's too bad that they missed that opportunity.
Yeah, and a last comment on that, having just recently worked on a couple of major projects on risk assessment for a couple of large tier ones, going all the way back to the front end. These are companies that are either making or I'll just say making mechatronic devices, high safety, functional safety involvement, and addressing the requirements management during phase 0 is a big deal. It's not stressed. I think this is, again, an opinion. It's not stressed enough in the APQP third edition. I know we do stress, and we will be stressing it in our training, and the functionality in the software to handle that is very robust, with requirements flow down and risk analysis feeding into system and design FMEAs. So it's not like we're ignoring it. It just wasn't addressed to the degree we would have liked it to have been addressed in this revision to APQP.
Yeah, the comments you made on sourcing, as these requirements roll down to the second and third tier supplier, how we source and control those are going to be critical from a safety perspective.
Okay, thank you. I have one other question. Do you advocate launch plus 90-day phase to feedback? In terms of safe launch and verification and longer term valid, yes. What we really stress is that phase 5 is a continual improvement phase. It's not a review phase, and that if you think that having passed PPAP, you're good to go, you're going to suffer a lot of pain because you're just meeting the minimum requirements. And if no further investment is made, and I mean, resource investment, people, time, effort, in continually improving that process after launch, it's going to become painful. So while we don't stress a requirement, we certainly stress this as best practice, as essential practice. The last question about will the complete video be uploaded? There will be a viewable version of it made available to you. You will be contacted. All the participants will be contacted by Omnex, and arrangements made to get you a copy of the recording of the webinar and the slide deck in some kind of a PDF form. So we're down to very few people left at this point. If there are any more questions, we'll hang on for a little while here. Mary, you have a comment you wanted to make?
No, that's fine. We'll keep
Oh,
going.
I thought you had your hand raised. Okay.
Nope. Oh.
So as I say, if you have any further questions, by the way, there was a suggestion that a confirmation email could be sent out for participation. I would expect your registration, your verification of your registration could serve that purpose, because you would have received an email that when you registered, that verified and gave you the link to join the webinar. Let's see, there's one here that looks interesting. Working in North Carolina, I found that the PD teams did not execute PDQA process. It's a comment really about what I would call knowledge management. It's referring to lessons learned, and it's a comment and question related to whether or not organizations are effective. I've talked about APQP as a risk management process, which it is. It is also a knowledge management process because of the multidisciplinary, cross-functional analyses and evaluations and improvement plans. A lot of knowledge comes out of an effective APQP process. And I would sort of agree with the questioner who says, who's asking the question, who says, one, that they're not impressed by what they've experienced, and does this new process enhance the execution of PDQA, PDCA? And I would say that because of the addition of metrics, of checklists, of senior management engagement in the planning and in the reviews, that certainly the opportunity is there to enhance the effectiveness of the process of the plan, do, check, act, plan, do, standardize, and act. Greg, that's kind of up your alley. Would you like to add anything to that?
No, I don't think I agree with you on that, but I don't have anything to add.
I referred it to Greg, of course, because he's a Deming Fellow and worked with the good doctor, which means he's also a very patient and tolerant fellow.
Mike Down was also part of the Deming group at GM when he was working at GM.
True. Mike, you have anything you'd like to add? It's an interesting question.
Not really.
Okay. I'm going to circle back again, David, to your question and just say it's up to the organization to do the analyses, to learn from the analyses, and to learn what is learned. I get a little frustrated. I work a lot with aerospace companies, and they're very big on lessons learned databases in engineering. And, my comment generally is, I don't consider lessons learned until they're taught. In other words, if you have learned a lesson, integrated into your standard work and into your specifications and things, so it's there. It's not something I have to go research. I sometimes jokingly refer to the frequently asked questions button on websites, and with the comment that if they're frequently asked questions, why aren't they in the content? Right? Yeah. The button should be for infrequently asked questions.
Real risk management and mitigation requires reuse and lessons learned.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if we're not a learning organization, we're not going to last.
No.
Okay.
or you're going to
So
spend a lot of money. It's going to cost a lot of money. So you could exist, but it's going to cost you a lot more money. So you got to take advantage of what you know and what you learn. And a lot of organizations do it poorly.
that I would absolutely concur with that. And then there are a couple of stellar organizations that do it really well.
Right.
And if you look at the marketplace and which companies have the highest market value and the best sales, somehow there's some uh, they're the same companies.
Yeah. Yep. Boeing needs some help with lessons learned.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to laugh, but oh my God. I spent some time working with uh, some aerospace supplier quality management teams, and it is having flown 2.5 million miles. It's distressing.
It is
Anyway,
scary.
on that note, well, thank you all. We're getting some nice thank you notes, which I appreciate. And again, I'll answer this question the last time. You will be contacted to get a copy of the recording and of the presentation. Everyone who actually attended. If you simply signed up and didn't attend, and you're not here and you're not hearing what I'm saying, you're not going to get a copy. Otherwise, Mary, any final comments?
No, I'm fine.
Great. Well, thank you. Mike, anything?
Nope.
Okay, great. Thank you, Greg.
No, nothing for me.
Okay, and I've already run my mouth enough. So thank you all very much for joining us. We appreciate your interest. And if there are questions we didn't answer, we will be happy to answer them, via email or something. Just write to us. And on that note, as we said, we are offering training starting in a week on both the transition and two types of courses, one on transition and one on comprehensive approach to APQP for people for whom it may be a new topic. And the transition courses are for people who are familiar with it and simply want to understand what we've been talking about in this webinar in much greater depth and detail. So on that note, thank you all for joining, and have a good rest of your day or night on where you are. And cheers. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.
Bye.